Hello.
Hey Preston, how you doing today?
Good. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, I can hear just fine. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay, very cool, very cool. So sorry about the little delay there. You know what it's like going from back-to-back Zoom calls, even on a Friday afternoon.
Yes. Yes, I do, definitely. It's Friday fun day, so I try to do something fun today, technology wise. So so
Awesome.
yeah, trying to get into that mode.
Fantastic. So let's just go ahead and jump right into it. So tell us a little bit about yourself and your organization and what you're passionate about.
Sure. So I'm Preston Mccauley, of course. I work for Tonic3. I'm the principal AR VR UX designer and strategist. I guess my title's very long because I
Very,
take
but
on
very cool. I've never heard a title as cool as that. That's a very cool title.
well, I kind of picked it out because I have to talk with a lot of different people in a lot of different roles across the organization as well as with clients and such. What I'm passionate about the most is, well, I spend a lot of time on my computer, so it's definitely within the AR and VR space. And then a second to that would probably be most likely UX because I teach it and love it and get to do all the fun things to help people learn.
Fantastic. So the biggest question I have on when it comes to design and UX is uh, why do things have to look good but not work well?
Why do things have to look good but not work well?
But they don't
You know,
necessarily work well. If it looks good, people will buy the damn thing, even if it doesn't work very well. Because I'm like a former engineer. As a former engineer, I was focusing on does the damn thing work, and on the
yes.
flip side is like the designer's like, oh, no, as long as it looks good, people love it.
No, I really think well, I actually believe both things should kind of come into play. So it should look good as well as work well. But I think the biggest challenge is funny you mentioned that because I just said that in my last day of class with my students was it's all about making people feel good about the products that they're using. And that also means that it has to be engineered appropriate, right? I think that's some of the bigger challenges in UX. I tell the students, I was like, when you're able to master the design aesthetic and the integration of beautiful design along with beautiful functionality, that's when you're ready to continue to work in this field and move on and explore and gain more knowledge. So yeah, but it's a constant battle because it's time, resources, and money at the end of the day. That's what it boils down to.
Yeah, I think what's happened is that it's like design is actually more than just the way it looks, right?
Oh yeah,
It's the whole operation end
most
to end.
definitely.
So engineering is sort of part of it. So is that how you see it too? Is like an entire end-to-end experience?
Yeah, I mean that's specifically what I teach and what I preach as well is that you really need to understand the entire product life cycle, not just the design aspect or the development aspect, but more importantly, why am I building this product? Why does it make sense to build this? Because if you're designing something that you don't truly understand, then you're going to just design something that most likely won't align with what people want to use and how they want to use it. So, I mean, that's the number one thing I keep telling people is, you got to make sure that when you're building something that you feel confident that you're hitting on all those key points. Because at the end of the day, if you're not, then people just won't use the product anymore, or someone's going to jump over you, do something better.
Exactly. So do you do
Yep.
more software or hardware design?
Not so much on the hardware design side. I haven't I haven't put together a computer in quite a while, but I did know enough about it to do that back in the day when I was doing just kind of playing with lots of different hardware. But I do have the opportunity working with the AR VR space to work with a lot of kind of cutting edge tools, some that may not even be available yet. So there is that ability. And you do have to understand, just like I said on the product side, what are the limitations of the hardware and how far can I push it from a design perspective. So for me, I'm more on the application kind of product design UX aspect of things right now, not so much on the hardware side.
So so when it comes to AR and VR, it still
Mhm.
feels like it's a little out there, right? I mean, is now like a good time for companies to start seriously thinking about building those kind of interfaces? Because it still seems to me that it's a little bit out there for like the regular,
Yeah.
the typical customer.
It's interesting. I gave a talk a while ago on specifically, is it the time for VR? And I gave that talk 3 or 4 years ago, I think it was. And I was saying, yes, it's time for VR. And the truth of the matter is, we're very much like the same patterns as we repeated in the past from a historical standpoint. Is everyone's like, should I build a mobile application? And it's yes, you should now. Like that's just a must,
No,
right?
no, it's too late. It's behind you now. It's in the rearview mirror.
Exactly. Yeah. You don't want to be looking in the rearview mirror. You want to be looking ahead to see what road bumps you're going to hit with your product, with your company, and with your brand and with your strategy. So definitely, the one thing I say is there's a lot of mobile applications out there, mobile devices now that can support very complex AR capabilities, and we just need to take advantage of them. The capabilities are built well within the platform, the hardware now for well over 4 years plus now. So it's still those people that are trying to take advantage of it are still trying to figure out kind of how to make it work for them. But it's like any other type of product, you really have to think about the strategy. Like, is my audience going to be there? Does it make sense to build a virtual reality headset product if I don't have any of my customers out there? Sometimes, if a lot of people will build something unique for like a trade show or something like that, but I'm trying to push that envelope even further to everyday use. I always like to say that I have holograms all around me at my house actually. So I'm used to it. They've kind of taken on an object permanence, so I kind of know where they are in the room and the environment. My hope is that everybody someday will think about digital objects and digital holographic objects as that. And so no, I would say we're right in the place where I kind of expect us to be. We're about the 5th or 6th generation of VR headsets now. It's certainly not the lawnmower days of VR, when, if you remember Lawnmower Man from back in the days.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, where you're getting in there and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna be nauseous so quick. You can still do that, but the graphics are improving daily. We're kind of in the TV race, if you will, for where we are with VR right now, where it's like resolution bump. Like I got 4K, I got 8K, right? Just around the bend, we're gonna start seeing someone.
Is there 16K yet?
What's that?
Is there 16K yet?
No, I still think that's a little bit off. And also the numbers are a little bit misleading, even like they are in the television world, where 4K is really just 2K per eye, because you have to push the both 4K to both eyes to make it true 4K. So it's really exciting though, because just in the last few years, the technology has evolved with a lot of the key devices. Oculus Quest has really pushed the envelope, I see, forward with what we can do with these devices, especially when they rolled out just basic hand tracking, so you don't have to use a controller, and it's just calculating your hand position and joint positions from looking through the camera. It really is a game changer, but people are still trying to learn how to use that technology in a way that's going to work for their application.
Right, because it typically, I mean, software kind of has to follow, or the use has to follow the hardware. Like, I'm not just going to buy the hardware and then hope that some software comes out that's awesome.
Yeah.
There's going to be some key thing that sort of drives you to buy the hardware, right?
Yes.
And has that key thing happened yet? I mean, maybe not in the VR space. Not in VR space yet.
I guess it depends. I mean, when you look at it so there's a couple different audience perspectives. I look at this. I look at it from the technophiles and then kind of the everyday use, right? I'm a big follower of the Gartner hype cycle, and watching a lot of those things. And I've been watching how VR has left its maturity, its hype phase, and now we're into the productivity phase. I personally use VR pretty much every day in my prototyping processes and methodologies. So I've taken that and evolved how I would traditionally work on something in a pen and paper or even a 2D tool. And instead, I prefer to hop into VR because I can become a lot more abstract with my thought and also share that with someone else in a way that they will understand it too. There's a great talk out there, a TED talk about how hard it is to get that idea out of my mind into your mind. Because when we all see something, we look at the product and we're like, oh, that's not a chair. That's not what I envisioned in my head at all. So that's one of the great things that I think from a productivity standpoint that a lot of people haven't had the opportunity to explore yet. But for me, it's like an everyday situation. Now, as far as kind of ordinary use cases throughout the day, certainly gaming is obviously a big one on a lot of people's minds. The game industry is jumping into VR a lot, and definitely into AR as well. But I would say from a maturation level, virtual reality is, we have control systems, we have expected interaction design patterns, we have the ability to push high scale graphics now. We can use it mobile. I'm the crazy guy that's outside my house with a VR headset on in the park.
I fell asleep on the subway, right, with the VR headset.
Yeah, no, I have used it, to watch movies and watch shows and stuff, and attend certainly during all of the pandemic issues we've had here. It's really been a lifeline in many ways, because it hasn't slowed down my work process flow at all, because I've just brought colleagues into that experience, and so we work in that medium, and we're still getting the same type of results that I would expect if we were sitting face to face. So it's pretty exciting.
It still seems though that it still kind of doesn't have the killer app yet that's going to sort of drive people to, like, everybody have one at home. I mean, do you know what the sales are like? I mean, how many VR headsets are there out there?
So, boy, I don't have the numbers right off the hand. I usually do have those numbers on hand, but right off my head, I don't have them. I do know that I believe the Oculus Quest sales were 2 million for the Oculus Quest 2. So, and then I believe the Steam VR devices. So Steam has this number that they release, which is essentially how many connected devices are connected into Steam VR. And with the release of what was it? Alex, I believe it was. The new VR game came out. They were moving up to around 24 million connected headsets to the system for that month. So it's been on a steady increase. Certainly, it's hard to get an Oculus Quest device because they've just been sold out. The inventory is not that easy to obtain. In fact, I grabbed a few right when they were coming out, because I knew that I was impressed with the Oculus Quest 1, and I knew that the Oculus Quest 2 was going to really pull out all the stops. So from that standpoint, I think the great part of that is that the cost is now at a point where most consumers couldn't afford it, and where they're trying to get the technology, certainly with the Oculus side, is almost on a 2-year revision cycle. I think the next thing we'll start to see, we already actually see this with devices like the Unreal device. I don't know if you've heard of that one. It's an AR headset. I ordered it about, I want to say, a year and a half ago. I think it's being delivered maybe to next week. But
wow,
it worked. Yeah, I know. There's a patience level there with some of the technology too. They released a lot over in Korea in the device, and they've been pairing with like their telephone carriers there, because it tethers to the actual phone device to produce to run the AR. I actually had the opportunity to work with just some people remotely a while back when they were doing the MIT hackathon. So I got to see the device and how people were building with it, and provide some insight into some of those things that they were designing, the various students that were going through that process. But devices like that, I think, are going to become the norm, where we have a tethered AR experience, because the battery power, we can't get the battery there yet. So that's going to be the big challenge from the AR side. The big the big one on the block that everybody's waiting for is the big Apple
Oh
AR
yeah,
headset.
I mean, I'm thinking that's in fact that's what I'm thinking. Like on the AR side, there's not really a lot in the mainstream on it. I mean, on the VR side, you obviously have Oculus, right? But on
Yeah,
the AR side, there's very little. I think that's sort of mainstream. I mean, I've seen a
yeah.
few things out there like HoloLens
HoloLens too.
trying. It's like trying to get into the mainstream, but you're right. I
Yeah,
mean, I think you're right. Everyone's waiting for the Apple AR glasses because they know that's going to be the super commercialized product. Because Apple they'll wait until it's ready to be,
yeah,
regular Joe on the street walking around with one of these things.
exactly. And there's a lot of speculation that I've been watching the rumor mill, specifically that the device is going to come out. I think I made a prediction. Each year I do an event where I basically give kind of my forecast of where the industry is headed and what's happening in technology, everything like that. And a couple of years ago, my prediction was, I believe it was 2022 or 2023 for an Apple AR headset. Now that's kind of lining up still pretty much from what I've seen. The thing is when Magic Leap, which was a very big player in the industry, was getting all the hype, we were watching it, grow up. And then a lot of people got the devices, and it's back here on my wall of devices, actually. It ended up being tough to do some development for. The SDK wasn't fully there yet. And then, of course, there were a lot of other issues that happened with these companies. And I have closets full of, sadly, sad tech that has not survived. Right, my favorite one is my haptic device.
What was it
What's
called?
that?
It wasn't called VR Boy. What was that Nintendo?
Oh, the Virtual Boy.
The Virtual Boy. That's it.
Yeah, yeah, the
I
one
actually
with the
got one of
red.
those off eBay for my kids. That thing's
Nice.
actually not so bad.
Yeah, yeah, I remember that device too, and that was, I mean, that was top of line back then. But yes, I have similar graveyards back there for my technology in my closet, which are specifically the one I'm the most upset about is the haptic suit I have, because it's a VR haptic suit, and uh, it had a lot of promise, and it's not, the tech hasn't gone away. I mean, we're seeing this in a lot of LBS, location based, systems like that are out there where you go play VR. Of course, those are going to come back into play again once we get this whole pandemic thing under control. We'll start to see some more of the location based systems pop up. And with these devices, like even with HoloLens, they even said that they were going to go specifically, they told a lot of the developers that they were going to go business first, really. So they started to go a little bit consumer, and then they're like, well, I don't think we can do this as a consumer product yet. And HoloLens 2, it's come leaps and bounds from where that is. But the Apple headset, it'll be interesting to see, because, like you mentioned, Apple usually goes consumer first. But I feel that the industry is changing a little bit, and I think they're feeling a little bit leapfrogged by the other competitors. Certainly HoloLens 2 has taken a huge stand on that side. I kind of believe that they might actually try a business level first approach, which would be very radical for them. But
Would
the
be
price
radical
point,
for them.
it would be.
Radical. That is not how Apple's been
I
innovating.
know. But the price point of the hardware, alone, unless they take a loss, you're probably looking at about $3,000, even if you look at the smallest kind of wavelength guides and things like that need to exist for that. But I've been really excited because it's fun to watch this technology evolve, and to see, oh, I know what, like, if you ever go back in the day and look at like Google's portfolio of acquisitions, you can kind of paint a picture of where they took the technology and how they evolved it for the past 10, 15 years. I've loved to do that. So I've watched like Apple acquisitions and these other companies to see what are they putting into their tech, and how are they trying to build their roadmap forward. With Apple, it's all been about putting in this deep neural network AR capability and spatial mapping systems. And I remember talking way back when to a client, I was like, I know exactly what's happening here. They're building their platform from the inside out of their device, which is why it is very much a sleeping giant, so to speak, inside of the hardware, because once you have the capability to understand complex spatial maps, uh, that's really the first part of my holy grail. Then we get into like 6 or 7, 8 more tiers, but at that point you're going to have people that can continue to update those maps and those sequences, and then we kind of get more towards the future, the Tony Stark future here, where you just walk into your room and you have the hologram just adapt to you. That's what I'm hoping for.
Yeah. No, I'm getting this sense that, of the two technologies, I mean, VR is probably going to stay pretty niche, right? I mean, you can't just use it everywhere and anywhere. And AR is the one that's really going to be sort of super commercial. Everyone's going to be because Apple's going to come out with something that actually looks like a reasonable pair of things that you're going to wear on your face. It's not going to look like Google Glass, right? It's going to look like an actual pair of glasses, or it's going to be socially and culturally appropriate, right?
Yeah.
So they're going to, and it's going to be designed very well, right? So that's when it's really going to become hugely mainstream, and VR is going to remain sort of like a niche product that not a lot of people are using. Do you see that happening, or?
I actually, what I think I'm going to see more, what we're going to see more of, because I mean, with complex AR, you can actually just simulate VR. So the mixing of the mediums is going to be much more of a norm. We are already starting to see the foundations of that, and I even saw it very early on in one of my earliest HoloLens applications I was working with, where I was like in a Coliseum or something like that. And they basically darken the opacity around the lenses, and so that ultimately puts you in VR technically instead of AR.
Oh, yeah, exactly, because you're basically simulating VR by using VR glasses.
So these devices, they're going to go through a couple of iterations to get through the wavelength and getting the resolution up. We're probably not too far off. I mean, maybe 5-10 years, we'll have a good consumer kind of AR, VR switchover. The technology is just, I mean, I'm really surprised how it's evolving. I have a HP Reverb G2 headset, which is top of the line, and a couple other ones. And I hate to say this, but sometimes my Oculus Quest 2 performs better than that more expensive headset. So yeah, I hate that actually. But that's exciting, because if you think back into the day when we had CD-ROMs, right, and CD-ROM writers, right, the fun thing with CD-ROMs is that they were so expensive at the onset, right? And then you get a DVD writer and you're like, I can't afford that. This could be $1,000 or $2,000 or $25,000, and then it became like you could get a CD for like 3 cents and a CD writer for $15, right? So we're not there quite yet, but we're not too far off from that level of production, and so that's really exciting, because that's what we need to get there, to be able to build kind of experiences that people haven't really dreamed of yet.
So is now the time for companies to say, okay, I'm going to start building AR or VR interfaces to my products?
Yeah, I would say definitely now. And I say that not just as a follower and technophile. I say that because I'm looking at and I've lived through past trends of seeing mobile, the old mobile, not like the mobile we had, like even before mobile web, like WAP, all of the mobile ed, wired access points that we would have there specifically, and then moving forward into using mobile phone devices like the flip phone devices and such, and then of course into our mobile applications that we have today. So with those capabilities, we have now the technology, even with 5G coming online in some cities. It's still sporadic, but you can deliver complex and models across those networks. Certainly in urban areas, it's a little bit harder to do in some of the rural areas. If you've ever been to a rural area before with one of these devices and you're like, oh my gosh, I just switched over to 3G LTE. What is that? I don't even know what that is anymore. But yes, I think it is the time to do the planning and the strategy, because like you said earlier, You don't want to be in the rearview mirror. You don't want to be looking backwards and going, wow, I wish I would have done that earlier. And a lot of the companies that I've talked to, even a couple of years ago, were really looking at their marketing budgets and trying to go, what's our AR play? What's our VR play? How does this fit into our overall strategy? And you know, it was kind of sitting, a lot of those budgets were kind of sitting more in the innovation budget pool, where it's like, okay, we'll toss some money at it and we'll hope something happens. I never feel very, very good about that. I always like to tie some ROI to that, even if it's like, how many people looked at this? You know, how many gazes were on this particular product? How many people downloaded it, right? So that you have something objectively that you can measure, as opposed to just kind of throwing money at the problem. Because we saw the same exact pattern in the mobile, in the early days of mobile with the Apple and Android stores. It's like, I just need an app up there. I don't care if it can just click a button, right? I don't care if it can just turn on a flashlight. Whatever it is, I need to have something up there, and I need to have my brand identity on it. I think with these devices, because there's, with AR and certainly even with VR, because they're so, the technology can be so immersive, if it's tied to an appropriate brand strategy, I do believe that people will start to kind of welcome those types of experiences into your house. I had this one just crazy idea, right? Like, think about a brand mascot that actually interacts with inside of your house as a hologram, right? You walk downstairs and Tony the Tiger's like, you're out of cereal, right? Or something like that. But it ties to that whole kind of thing that you see definitely a lot in Japan with mascots for cities and things like that, right? We're a little bit slower on that aspect. But if you look across the board, it's not too hard to do that today. And the thing that's going to really empower that is this kind of object permanence of holograms now, these spatial cloud systems and open cloud structures, because you could do that. You can walk outside the door and you're like, oh, look, there's my favorite mascot there. You're saying, hey, have a good day, or, you know, whomever you want it to be. So that is all possible today at varying levels. Much like everything else, it's really determined based upon how good you how well your strategy is orchestrated and how well you can execute on that. So I mean, I say do it now. If there's no time like the present, because when it's past, it's past.
Well, I love the idea of this mascot, or sort of like virtual character or whatever. And I know it's huge in Japan. And of course, some people are actually even marrying their virtual characters in Japan, right? What is it? Is it a G-Box or something like that, where you can actually buy a hologram and it's in, like, you can keep it on the side table, and she calls you during the day and say, when are you going to be home, and stuff like that. I'm like, that's the kind of stuff that we're going to see more of?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, you know, sci-fi is driving a lot of the wonderment. And if you look at all the phones, and the flip phone, of course, was really inspired by Star Trek, right? The tricorder and all these different devices. So we're still wanting to aspire to those sorts of things. I tend to lean heavily towards the utopian side, while a lot of other people tend to lean on the dystopian side. So I'm looking at it for technology. I like technology for the sake of technology, but you know, there are certainly ethical concerns you have to consider when you're doing this. But to get to these kind of uniform platforms where you can kind of have that level of execution, there's got to be new types of security models kind of put into place that are I call it a personal augmentation layer. And it's basically much like existing security methods that you have today, but they relate to spatial relations and spatial coordinate systems and planar mapping. And you know, you're allowed to see my space, but I'm going to obfuscate the TV and any pictures in the room, and I have the technology to do that. It's kind of like Black Mirror, in a way, if you watch that, of course.
Black Mirror is so funny because it's always dystopian. I mean, I want to see.
I know.
I want to see an optimistic Black Mirror one day.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I don't think they will have that. But there's some interesting technology in there that, yes, they always try to go to the wrong side of the equation there. I do believe, though, if we leverage a lot of that technology, we can do some really cool things in some utopian ways, right? And we've seen this already with, helping doctors perform surgeries with holographic transparent overlay, where you're placing the incision mark on someone that's never performed a surgery before in a military situation, or even in a situation where there's no doctors to perform. So there are a lot of those applications, and a lot of people are exploring those places. It's just a matter of being bold enough to do so. And sometimes, though, the challenge is often around the restrictions, right? Because of health restrictions and data restrictions and things like that. So I think to get there,
legal stuff, man. That's
yes.
the problem.
Well, partially, but to get to like this unified system, like I don't want to get to a point where like one of my favorite movies from back in the day was Johnny Mnemonic, where you have these separated ecosystems. And that was even predicted a long time ago, is that you're like, okay, I'm going to get onto the ESPN hub, and I only can get this part of the internet. And we went through that with America Online, with Prodigy, with all these other services. I don't see us going back to that type of model. I see us kind of trying to open up the ecosystem, but history has taught us many times that technology is trying to be shut down, because if you remember the instant messenger wars, it's like, I just want to talk to someone else. I just want to text someone else. Why can't I do that, right? Which is great, actually, because those lessons of the past we're seeing come into light with like OpenXR technology. So it's opened it up to the web, and it's using the VR standards are using the same that are on the web, as well as with the different manufacturers of the devices. So that's going to really open the door for people to build on top of this, platforms that people won't have to understand how to code or design.
Is that here yet? So if I buy an Oculus Quest 2, am I safe in buying an Oculus Quest 2 and I don't have to worry about, I'm on this system or on that system, or
no,
I can play anything?
Not fully. I mean, a lot of them are all trying to maintain their application ecosystem still, but some of them have the ability to do like the family sharing kind of component, where you can share, like purchase one. If you're on Steam, Steam does that specifically with some of their games and some of their applications as well. But no, at the end of the day, it really boils down to, sometimes it takes a little bit more effort to build for some of these platforms. I do a lot of work with Unity, and I'm really pleased by the platform ecosystem, because you can hit mobile devices. I can build for future VR devices and future AR devices all in one fell swoop. And I may have to change the design patterns and the design systems around to address those. But overall, you're really going to be able to go to a lot of different platforms. So, but you still have to incur some cost, because it still does cost stuff to develop.
Yeah, well, I actually did some Unity work way back, and I'm glad that they're actually focusing in this space, because you really do need a platform or an SDK or whatever you want to call it, an environment to be able to develop this stuff that's easy and cross-platform, and you just write it once, and then it spits off all these different versions of it.
Yes, and that's the key. I mean, Microsoft's been doing that for a while now on their platform side as well, but even now, most of the HoloLens stuff plays nicely with inside of Unity. It's not like it was back in the day, because when I cracked open my HoloLens back in the day, it was it was like a Wild West. It was like, it worked at 3 o'clock, and then my code would not work at 5 o'clock, and I was like, and I didn't touch it, and I was like, what happened?
Oh my God. I remember those early days. Yikes.
And you just sit there, and I liken it to like playing with early video games that were really complex. You wanted to throw the controller, like, I'm just gonna throw this is that, hit the side of the TV, maybe it'll work, I might be lucky, we'll see. Yeah, it's a lot of crazy.
Fantastic. Well, I still think that the biggest problem with AR and VR is that we're still actually just sort of putting things in front of our senses.
Yeah.
Do you ever foresee a moment when we can actually bypass them and just go straight to our brains?
Oh boy. Well, there are some explorations. I've done a lot of exploration myself personally and done some research on, um, I call it kind of dimensional design theories, and looking specifically at how user experience impacts the virtual experience by measuring both brainwaves as well as biometrics at the same time. And so there's been a lot of interesting things in some of that core research that I had been working on, where uh, you can definitely see that people could be influenced, or rather can influence the virtual world. In fact, one of the things I wanted to work on, I didn't get a chance to do it, was I wanted to, using this brainwave device I have, I wanted to just spawn an object that I thought into my virtual environment. That's still on my list to do, like detect the particular alpha, beta, gamma brainwave. And then if I hit that sequence, or I hit that right elevation of sequence, like learning to manipulate your brainwave patterns a little bit, and like, okay, I'm gonna spawn a cheeseburger, right? And just have that hologram appear in front of you, or that virtual.
Can you do
And
that? Are we at that level of accuracy where you
yeah,
can when you can think cheeseburger and it actually there is actually a brainwave pattern which is cheeseburger and you can have it instantiate cheeseburger?
I don't know if there's a brainwave pattern specifically isolated for the cheeseburger analogy.
My cheeseburger
However,
pattern was the same as your cheeseburger pattern. That'd be great because you could just have a library of human cheeseburger patterns.
They're probably not. But no, what I would do is I look at a certain, probably a certain amplitude of brainwave. I suppose if I was staring at a particular type of image or something like that, I could potentially get a brainwave pattern to match. But then what I would do is I would just hook it up inside of Unity, and I'd hook up the device to speak to my Unity project. And so if I have my VR headset on and I'm looking at the table, in that instance, I would just set up code to basically instantiate an object there that matches matches what I was thinking. It sounds crazy, but it's actually totally doable. Yeah, it's just a matter of sitting down and doing it.
Don't we need like a more accurate brainwave scanners though? Because it seems to me that we need like.
No, there's a couple devices on the market. There's a couple devices on the market, yeah, that are out there that are open for developers, and they have open brain APIs specifically to work with those types of things. I can't remember the one. M-Wave, I think, is one device. I'm trying to think of another one. I might be wrong on M-Wave, but yeah, no, they're out there, and they're ready to use. And specifically, I was using a lot in my own research to kind of help improve user experience, because there's a number of factors. I think I broke it down, my process methodology for looking at user experience. I have it broken down to about 22 different dimensions, and then sub-dimensions upon that. So as you're going through an experience, and this could also apply to AR as well, as you're going through an experience, what I wanted to do is, and I haven't done this yet, is actually put the person inside the experience of the experience. I'm very meta. I get very dimensional with things. So like, imagine if you're on a roller coaster that is actually the up and down patterns of the person's experience. So you're feeling the emotional like if you're like, oh man, their peak interest dropped off, and so suddenly you just are going up a ramp in that experience. So yes, I love those things.
Wait a minute. So your interest drops and you go up? Is that what you're saying? So like,
or down. So yeah, like imagine if you had like a wave, like a roller coaster, and the person's in like whatever experience. Let's say they're going into an application where they're training on learning about safety in a factory, right? And when you're looking at that experience, a lot of the research I was trying to do is figure out, are people engaged? Are they excited? Are they retaining information? And looking at all those different factors, both the bio as well as the observational, as well as the information that's coming back from brainwave patterns and such, kind of looking at that and going, oh, I could actually take that moment of someone going through that training experience and map it into a VR roller coaster simulation and show them, actually have the person in VR going, oh, this is what this user is feeling when they go through it. So when they get really excited about something that happened, like maybe someone accidentally moved the crane moved in the simulation and their pattern goes off, right? They could feel that amping up of excitement. It's a whole new way to think about analytics, because you're not just looking.
It's a hell of a lot more exciting than just looking at a dry report.
Exactly. That's the whole point, is actionable analytics through something that you can actually can feel. And that's where I think VR is really going to excel. Not just spreadsheets.
I love that, because it's like you can feel. It's like if you can sort of like sense. It's almost like being empathetic, right? It's like you can actually sense the empathy. Can you imagine what that would do for design thinking? You put.
I love it. It's so exciting, and I was working on a whole kind of concept prototype for that right before COVID, and then I had to pause a lot of the research, but a majority of it was complete, and I was moving forward on kind of creating some of those new ways. So I'm still creating those methods, but yes, that's exactly right. You followed me to a T, is the empathy that you would feel going through someone's experience. And it didn't have to be the same experience for one application. This could be a training application, this could be a surgery application, but the model and approach would be consistent across the board. And so you could come up with trends and patterns specifically. So, and then a cheeseburger at the end for reward. No, I'm just kidding. Not a cheeseburger for reward. But, and the fun thing is,
hey, Burger Time was one of my favorite games. I love Burger Time.
I don't think I played that one as much. But the other aspect of that is, what's really fun to watch is putting together a virtual simulation and seeing how some of the observational effects of people too. My favorite thing is is looking at what I call IIs, which are kind of like indicators of dimensional awareness. So when you're in the system, when you're in the VR experience, how tricked is your brain in the simulation, right? So my favorite thing to watch in some of our research videos was I had a simulation where people would basically go through and set the table. And they'd reach into the file cabinet in virtual reality, and I mimicked the room in the reality.
Right.
And a lot of people would try to kick the virtual door closed with their foot. And it just made me so excited to see, because I'd also noticed in their brainwave patterns that they would spike because they were hitting an expectation, an excitement. They're like, oh, that didn't work. Something's wrong. Right. So those are just some really fun things.
It's jarring, right?
It's jarring. It's jarring, yeah. Yes. But it's exciting to see those things, because it shows, like, with minimal technology where we are right now, in 15 years, where we could be is to that simulation where you look at it and go, I'm so engrossed. And you can do that today, even with, it's not always about the fidelity of the graphics. It's about the experience and how that comes together. So
yeah, well, you were talking about, so I'm taking my brain because I'm generating cheeseburgers, but how can I sort of bypass my senses? I mean, that's a long way off, right? Being able to sort of bypass your eyes and your ears and to be able to just feed stuff directly in. I mean, I'm not Matrix style stuff.
There's been some research done. I saw some really good things at South by Southwest a few years ago, maybe 4 years ago. It's been a while now, specifically working with phantom limb syndrome and phantom arm syndrome, and where they were trying to replicate the same types of motion and understand why it was in a virtual robotic hand and such. So, and then just using sensors to basically detect, what was that trigger point, and being able to trigger it. So we're there. It's just, you have to have a lot of money or a research facility to get a lot of these things done. I don't know if there's one device out there that I've seen on the market that I'm still floored to this day, and no device has really excited me as much as and I don't get paid for any of this. I just really approve of the tech haptics. It was the first time I think it might have been 4 years ago, where I got to pet a virtual fox.
Ooh.
And it was something that had stayed with me in this space, because when you can feel fake fur on an animal and still
You could
have
actually feel it? It actually
yes,
felt realistic? Wow.
yes, yes. And the technology's come a long ways. Today, they've even released a different type of version of the hardware that's less money and more compact. But definitely one of the better experiences, and it's crucial. These types of devices are crucial in order to really help that push virtual reality forward as well. Even AR, because we want to still feel those same senses. We don't want to just be cut off from our touch and our smell.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was at an ICS when we did a sort of like a virtual experience where you're walking around, and they actually had to physically put physical objects in places where you would expect something to be.
Yeah.
Because if you like reached out to touch this book and it wasn't there, it just felt so weird, right? So they had to place a book. It wasn't the actual same book. It was just like a different book, but they had to still place the physical objects there. And that's kind of defeating the purpose, right? Because if you're going to have to put physical objects, then it's not a holodeck, man. We want the holodeck right now.
Yeah. And I am waiting for some more advancements in this tech, specifically micro haptics. I think are going to be big, because I just want to put like a little sensor on my fingertips so I can feel just basic pressure, and then it could also do heat and warm, or heat and cold temperatures, and that's going to be necessary to really bring that virtual experience to the next level, because you're in a situation where you're teaching people about hypothermia outside, and they're like, your fingertips get cold, right? And as I tell my students in their environments when they're building them, like, you can show these things by putting a thermometer on the wall and showing it's negative 20 degrees, or you could have some wind come in, or a winter storm.
You have a character who's shivering.
Exactly, right. It's all those sensory inputs there that you're trying to hit on. And with these particular devices, like, if you could just like feel it, like, oh, that ice cube is cold in virtual reality, right? And it just would align with those mental models. And we still got a little ways to go there. Like, it's kind of like my hierarchy here. There's once we get the planar awareness, and then we kind of go up to there, we start to get to contextual awareness, and then we start to dive deeper into that. But it's the one thing I say to a lot of young UX designers and information architects, which is they're needed more than ever right now to figure out how to not just store all of this information, but categorize it in ways that we've never done before, which is interesting, because the digital age, technically we're kind of in the heyday of the digital age, but we've only scratched the surface of actually understanding how to document, classify, and break down this information in a way that's usable. Big data was the big thing, like 3 years ago or 5 years ago, right? All the companies jumping on big data, right? We haven't even seen big data yet. Like, that's it's going to be huge. So
well, that's the thing. It's like everything. It's like sometimes I feel like we're really technologically advanced, and then I look at all the stuff that we could be doing, and I'm like, wow, we're still so far away from where we could be.
Flying cars, but the practicality of flying cars and the practicality of a lot of this is sometimes what I think holds it back.
Come on, man, flying cars, there's less stuff up there than there is on the road, so it should be easier to do flying cars, right?
Yes, but the problem with the flying cars is you can have a lot more things go wrong when a car is flying above your head.
That's true.
So, not to be on the dystopian side,
gravity.
Yeah. I mean, I'm excited about all of the things that are like, we're taking these kind of baby steps even on Mars. If you take a look at Ingenuity and the helicopter test that's supposed to be here any day now, I think. But it amazes me every single time I see one of those, because it's like, someone asked on Twitter, they were like, why is it taking so long to take this helicopter out of the Mars rover? And someone's like, they're on Mars. Like, you get one shot, you don't get
everything yesterday, man.
Yeah, you don't get any other shots. So you're going to run 37 simulations and make sure that step A works, right? Yeah. Otherwise, you don't get it. You can't send a repairman or repair person out there to do it. It's just not going to work. So this is where I think that we run into a lot of challenges with some of the practicality, but I'm really excited. Even in the medical space, we're seeing a lot of changes, like with the new vaccines that are out, of course, doing molecular biology inside of VR is a new way to really try out new simulations, combining it with AI. It's really exciting. I mean, it's exciting because we're definitely going to enter into a little bit of a new kind of medical evolution for a little while here, as we're trying to push forward the new technology. So I'm excited about that.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that you said earlier was really interesting. It's like when you were talking about AR and overlaying sort of like instructions on what you're doing, it just reminded me of that scene from The Matrix where, Trinity wants to learn how to fly a helicopter, right? And he like jacks it in.
Yeah.
Couldn't you do the same thing? It's like, I want to learn how to fly a helicopter. You say it in your AR goggles. And then all of a sudden it says, okay, grab this lever, do this, do this, do this. And it just shows you what to do as you're doing it. I mean, that's going to change everything if you can do that.
Well, and I've seen some of those applications, not for flying helicopters, mind you, but working for heavy machinery and things like that, because we have gotten more sophisticated. There's a lot of different technology out there now that can actually do really good spatial mapping of equipment itself, and actually kind of make sure that it's looking at the right piece of the equipment while checking it with the camera. And so you can say, pull this lever. Great. Now move over here and do this. That's huge. I talked about this.
Just in time training. You could hire somebody off the street who doesn't know anything, slap these things on and say, go in there and do this stuff.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I think that is we'll see probably a lot more interesting jobs coming up in the future. It's like, what do you? Well, I'm just a remote robot operator. What do you do? Oh, I just put on this headset for 5 hours a day. Oh, okay, cool. What do you do? Whatever they tell me to do. What am I doing today? Am I unloading something? Am I, performing a surgery?
Earn your UBI. No, I'm kidding.
Yes.
All right. So it's the year 2031.
Okay.
Where are we? What's happening? Tell me about the world in 2031.
Well, we're probably still not going to have flying cars, sadly. But okay. I think we will. I think we will get closer and closer to having probably more small scale transport. I mean, I'm seeing a lot of those demos even here around Dallas, where I am, where they're really hitting hardcore with that. So personal flying vehicles, I think, are going to be probably not the thing, but more like on an Uber scale, probably.
Right.
I'm hoping that the AR cloud hits a level of maturation where we can start to think deeply about contextual understanding. That gets us closer to the Tony Stark moment, where a wall becomes an interface, open space becomes an interface, right? We've been dreaming about this.
Just get away from these screens. I would love that.
Yeah. And several of my friends in the ecosystem, they do that now. They have their HoloLens and they're not limited by screens. They have screen over here, screen over here. In virtual reality, I do that as well sometimes. I have like 7 screens up in my area because the screen's just virtual. So I think there's that. I think the other piece is really we're going to see several iterations of the technology. So, we'll be up to like, probably, if we look at where the pattern is right now, we're usually on about a 2 to 3 year refresh cycle. So if I was to project outwards, we'd have like the VR, we'd probably be to like VR generation 15 or something like that, right?
Right.
Now with neural haptic sensor tie-in capability.
We'll have Ready Player One. Will we be in the world of Ready Player One in 2031?
Yeah.
Will we be there yet?
I'm hoping we'll have more complex haptic suits, actually. Those will be really crucial to work. The first generation, there are some good ones on the market still, but they're still not quite there. The other thing is, everybody talks about AI being everywhere, but the thing is AI is already everywhere.
Oh yeah.
So
Absolutely.
it's just going to get smarter. And when we can tie that into some of these different jobs that might be dangerous or uh, don't exist today, I think there'll be a whole bunch more job fields that don't exist. What do you know, I told you about the robot person. I think the other aspect is really we've been dreaming about, I've been dreaming about a true smart home for a long time, where you just have a module in your house and you just, oh man, I'm going to upgrade my house to module Z555, and that comes now with my, you know, robotic holographic sentry that's outside
I
the
love that.
door, right?
Yeah.
I made that assumption a while ago, talking to a bunch of friends, and I was like, you know, in the future we're going to have these devices that are going to be in your home, and hey, well, we have smart hubs everywhere now. We have Google Home and Alexa and everything like that. So I think though that needs to be more modular, because the technology is going to have to adapt quicker to these things. But at the end of the day, it's really going to be more about uh, having more easier to access. Like right now, when I get into my VR, it's a
Yeah.
little bit like I'm preparing for fire, to
Yeah.
put out a fire.
You got to pull your
Right?
suit on, your gloves.
Yes, yes. It's an ordeal. It's an ordeal. By this point, I you know, just put on my glasses, and I believe, I mean, I'm already seeing the parts of that technology that would tell me in 10 years it should be pretty sophisticated to get some pretty high def in there. Will it be cheap? Probably not yet.
Yeah.
It's gonna, I mean, time has told this, things cost what people will pay for them. And so, you know, Apple's proven this time and time again. It's like, oh, you want an iPad? Great, that'll be $3,000. You want
Yeah.
this? It'll be $5,000.
Yeah.
So the other thing is, I'm hoping that there's a lot more remote remote meetings and more acceptance of it. I would have thought that we had a kind of a renaissance in that right now because of our current state of the world. And we did a little bit, but the problem was the technology wasn't there to supply all the people that needed
Yeah,
to
but
exist.
it definitely accelerated it. I mean, that's
Oh
one of the things
yes,
about crises is that it definitely, you know,
yeah,
the accelerator down. I mean, and now since we're coming out of it, things are starting to slow down again. I'm like, damn, you know, can't we just keep
yes.
the foot on the
I'm
accelerator?
noticing that too, and it's just because people are trying to resume some type of normal behavior, right? And
Yeah,
when they're trying to come out of it. But yeah, I want the accelerator on it, because that's when we're going to start hitting those practical problems, and that's
exactly.
what we need to solve for. So I think in the future, you know, 10 years out, we will have some pretty sophisticated hand tracking. I'm waiting for some type of module to exist in the house to do. I've already shared this idea with a lot of people, so I know someone's going to do it. Is basically it in the businesses as well. It does a spatial mapping scanning, and it
Mm,
basically updates the spatial mapping of real world objects on a cycle pattern. And then everybody will have their own personal augmentation layer and the personal cloud structure. Uh, it sounds so crazy talking about this stuff, but uh, I know a lot of people working on all these foundational aspects, and I've had the opportunity to work on a lot myself. So it's like it's it's not impossible. It's all plausible, and that's what I think is the most exciting about this space. Is I like to look at something and say, oh, you know what? I could do that. I could create a cheeseburger that's spawned off by my brain waves, and then the next morning sit down and go figure out how to do that. And that's what really inspires new business and new approaches, and people to really think about not not necessarily the dystopian aspects of future, but how they can improve their own future by just kind of thinking of an idea and making it come to life.
I love it. I love it. Well, thank you so much. This has been fantastic. If somebody wants
Thank
to get in touch
you.
with you, what's the best way?
Best way is on LinkedIn. I am just Preston Mccauley out there. I share tons of information for the past 10x years on VR, AR, and UX, and I try to interact with with many people out there as possible. So if people message me, I'm happy to respond. And if they want to learn more about UX, they can even take your course and go to smu.edu/UX, and you get to be in a course with me, and it's a crazy experience.
Fantastic. Love it. Well, I'll put your bio and other contact information in the show notes. So if anybody wants to get in touch with you, they can do it that way. Well, thank you very much, sir. Have a good one.
Thank you so much. Have a great day. Bye-bye.